bringing you the latest Arizona high school football recruiting news year-round. This is the Recruiting Roundup on ProsToPreps.com.
Welcome back in. It's time for the Roundup. Jason Jewell, Jared Cohen. Every week we bring you the latest in Arizona high school football recruiting. We do it year-round, but we especially love it this time of year because it's high school football season, and what an exciting season it's been so far. Like we do every week during the year, we bring you the players that really stood out last week and spotlight them, plus spotlight prospects facing off this week, in which will be some great games coming up. First off, Jason, recruiting news always first and foremost on this show. We had a commitment that came down on Monday night, very short after this player received his first offer, an offensive lineman out of Hamilton.
Yeah, big offensive lineman Trent Moore committed to Oregon State. Moore just received the offer last Friday. He just thought it out over the weekend, and he committed. I talked to Hamilton head coach Steve Bellis, and he said that Moore was just comfortable with the decision, wanted to go with Oregon State, and made his commitment.
Now, this is a guy that played tight end last year. He wasn't a starter going into this season. And now 3 games into this year, he has a Pac-12 offer, and it's totally changed his career.
Yeah, played tight end at 6'5", now weighs 250 pounds, very versatile, plays right guard, came in relief of Casey Tucker, who was hurt, and played some left tackle and stood out there as well.
So he's a very versatile player that's headed to Corvallis after his high school career. Some more recruiting news. Running back Josh Hoekstra out of Pinnacle, he had a big game last week against Hamilton despite the loss. He picked up an offer.
Yeah, he was offered by the University of San Diego. Pinnacle is kind of buzzing a little bit after playing Hamilton pretty tough in their game last week, and Hoekstra was the main reason on offense why the Pioneers were in the game. He also has an offer from Penn right now.
Had over 100 yards against that tough Hamilton defense. Pinnacle goes up against Basha this week. Should be a great matchup. Hoekstra is a guy to keep an eye on. Final recruiting tidbit to get through. One of the top in the state, Jalen Brown, took 2 visits over the weekend.
Yeah, he's already visited Oregon State. That was his first visit, and then visited Oregon last weekend. Also has a visit coming up to Wisconsin. Rumors he's also going to visit Vanderbilt. He has one more official visit that he'll eventually take before he decides to commit. Now, Jalen is going to graduate high school early and enroll in January, mid-year.
So with that being said, do you think that his decision could come pretty close after that final visit, or do you think he'll wait it out a little bit?
Yeah, I think he's going to take all 5 official visits before he makes his commitment.
And when you talk to him, do you get an understanding of where he might be leaning? Because he's looking West Coast, and then he's looking Midwest, 2 very different spots of the country.
Yeah, he's pretty laid back and plays everything kind of close, so I have no idea right now where he's leading to.
So that's the latest on Jalen Brown. Let's get into last week's stars. And the first one, every week we bring you the Recruiting Roundup Player of the Week. The first week, week 0, which is weird saying, Wesley Payne had a huge week against Bishop Gorman in their win in Las Vegas. Week 2, Bryce Perkins against Chandler. Week 3, Josh Eckley, an upsetting Chaparral last week, had a great week. But you know what, Jason? We don't like to always spotlight 2 players in a row, but based on what Josh Eckley has done now for the 2nd consecutive week, he is now for the 2nd consecutive time our Recruiting Roundup Player of the Week.
Yeah, how do you not make him the Player of the Week after his 8-touchdown performance against Buena in that crazy game where Marco scored 78 points? Eckley threw for 359 yards and 6 touchdowns and rushed for 158 yards and 2 more scores.
So Eckley kind of making his case for the state player of the year in this early season so far.
Right now, he has to be one of the early front runners, playing great.
Some other standouts from last week. Phoenix Christian's Scotty Jordan had a monster day at a game you were at.
Yeah, I was at this game, and Jordan, the first 2 carries of the game, scored on 2 very long touchdown runs. 80 yards and 70 yards. He ended up with 445 yards rushing. That's amazing. And in this day and age of a lot of spread offenses, you don't see 400-yard rushers. We see quite a few 400-yard passers, but this is the first 400-yard rusher we've seen since we've been doing the Roundup.
Liberty has a couple really talented guys in the secondary, even though their defense has scuffled a little bit. But one player in particular, a junior, was a playmaker all over the field last week against Notre Dame Prep.
Yeah, Corey Wilson, their junior corner, had an 80-yard touchdown reception, had a 100-yard fumble recovery for a touchdown, and also had another pick in the game. He's a player that I know that Dan Philman at Liberty is very high, and they think he has Division I potential.
Yeah, and they've also moved their talented and leading tackler, Zach Neal, to the secondary as well. Liberty with a big game against Centennial on the west side this weekend. Next player, Matt Guida, was injured, so their backup running back, Weston Barlow, comes in, and Queen Creek didn't even miss a beat with their running game against Sholo.
Yeah, he rushed for 231 yards and 4 touchdowns. Very impressive.
And then finally, the last player to get to had a great game on both ends of the ball. Is a little bit more well-known in the recruiting world on the offensive side, but Jordan Brown at Paradise Valley had a very nice game.
Yeah, he had two interceptions, also had a receiving touchdown, and a block to PAT as well. I talked to PV head coach Donnie Yanis, and he thinks that Brown is just now starting to heat up, getting some buzz, and his first offer may be around the corner.
So those were some of the stars from last week. Let's look to this coming week. Some huge matchups. We already went over a couple of them, but the two that we are going to spotlight right now, the first one, big showdown in Scottsdale, going to be on ESPN, Desert Mountain against Chaparral. Quarterbacks on display. The first one, the obvious one, despite the first week, which he really struggled, which was surprising, Kyle Allen has kind of picked things up over the last couple weeks.
Yeah, last week against Willow Canyon, he was 20 of 24 for over 300 yards and 5 touchdowns. He threw 3 of those touchdowns to big Mark Andrews. Andrews had 200 yards receiving. I expect a big performance on a big stage for Kyle Allen.
And that's the Texas A&M commit, Kyle Allen, going up against a quarterback, a junior quarterback that's really had a nice start to his season so far. That's Sean Paul Brophy at Chaparral.
Yeah, he's a kid that we spotlighted early as potentially having a breakout year, and he's playing very, very well so far at this point in time. There's just going to be athletes all over the field in this game. What a great stage for Arizona high school football.
And finally, the next game to get to is going to be on the west side. This should be a great showdown. Kind of two teams that have similar identities. Desert Edge, a newer school starting to see success. Shadow Ridge, an even newer school that is really starting to build their program. They're both undefeated and facing off this weekend. And for the Desert Edge Scorpions, their quarterback, Anthony Hernandez, has just been a monster so far this season.
Yeah, he's thrown for 1,500 yards and 17 touchdowns in his first year as a starter. We know Sawyer Lung played great last year, and quarterback was a question mark for the Scorpions. So Hernandez is playing very, very well. His big receiver, Elijah Marks, has had 2 200-yard performances in a row. And then we look at Shadow Ridge, who had a very big win last week against Cactus. So 2 high-profile teams on the west side, a game that I personally will be at, and I'm very excited to be at that game.
Yeah, and the guy that's been leading the way for Shadow Ridge on the defensive side of the ball, Sam Verstraeten, is having a great season. You hear more and more about him with each passing week. That'll do it for this week's edition of the Recruiting Roundup. This is Jason Jewell. I'm Jared Cohen. Make sure you stay with us throughout the high school football season. It's the Recruiting Roundup on ProsToPreps.com.